Spectruminal, Trinity, Spectruminal, Trinity, Spectruminal, Trinity, Spectruminal, Trinity. Hello, and welcome to a special video. Well, new series where I'm going to be ranking episodes of a podcast. It's a podcast near and dear to my heart. If you couldn't catch the intro there, it would be the Spectruminal Trinity podcast. Trinity. Because, well, as you'll find out from the ranking of this episode, there's three major components to this podcast that correspond with the three hosts. Haley the Tea Miser is in charge of giving out tea facts and covering an entire portion of the podcast dedicated to tea. Then we move over to Gavin for our paranormal experience. And finally, rounding it off with the lore keeper himself, Kyan. I was actually approached by Kyan a few months ago to take a listen to this podcast. And as you can see from the date of this video's release, I have been holding on to some of these things for the better part of 2 months. I haven't had a day to sit down and record for quite some time. But you didn't come to hear me yapping, and I'm going to keep this to, a way where we can all get out of here and experience 2 for the price of 1. That's right, I'm going to be ranking 2 episodes instead of 1 today, which will be a theme for this series because I am so far behind. So today I'm going to be covering episodes 1 and 2 of the Spectruminal Trinity podcast. So let's get into episode 1, shall we? So, for those of you who don't know how I usually run these episodes, normally I give an introduction, followed by explaining my criteria for the episode. In this case, it's on screen, as you can see. What I'll be basing this podcast criteria on is the title of each episode, out of 10. The tea of the day, I'll be listing that. The overall topics, this is where I'll be writing out everything that I took note of. And then here I have the 3 hosts of the podcast. I'll be ranking them each out of 10. I'll be counting how many times I laughed during the episode, and I'll be counting how many times they swear. Now, swear words have become a part of my brand, and thus I must continue to count them until the day I die. Thank you, Kyan and Gavin. And of course, at the bottom here, I'll be putting the rank, which is where I'm going to be placing it on the tier list when we get to the tier list part. So for episode 1, The Journey Starts. The title was a 10 out of 10. The tea of the day was Earl Grey. The overall topics were Meister or Miser. How the podcast started. They plugged the Wait We're Recording podcast, an old series of mine. You can find it on TikTok if you wish. Possible tea company startup. Haley's love of tea. Discussing the tea of the day. Tea bags versus loose leaf debate. Bergamot and Earl Grey tea. Tea vocabulary. Pairing Earl Grey with citrus fruits to battle the soap flavor. Soap you buy in bulk. The history of Earl Grey tea. Kids entertainment in the 1830s. The Amish. Moose video. The concept of entertainment. Roaring in community markets. The history of Earl Grey tea. Again. What pairs well with Earl Grey. Demigorgon. The paranormal. Scary shows. The science of the paranormal. Cryptids. Ghost adventures. The pyramids. Kyan's interest in world building. Kyan's first D&D campaign. The cult ideals. How money is the root of all evil. The ideal afterlife. Story time with Kyan. And Kyan explains the lore. Now Kyan was a 9 out of 10. Gavin was a 9 out of 10. Haley, the tea miser, was a 9 out of 10. I laughed 3 times, and I counted 133 swear words. The rank I'm giving episode 1 is S tier. Now on to my favorite part of this series, this ongoing theme of me rating podcasts. I take the funniest moment from each episode, and I play it for you all, so you can have a laugh too. So here is my favorite moment from episode 1 of the Spectruminal Trinitea podcast.
And we come to you as a cult that you will hopefully join with us and be with us for many months, years.
All are welcome.
Well, maybe not all.
Any and all ages.
We don't want them.
You're right. We don't want them.
We're talking about women.
I'm right here.
No. They don't need to know about that.
Now then, if you were expecting us to go to the podcast tier list and start putting things on there, you must have forgotten that we're doing 2 episodes today and for this entire series. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to episode 2, Sniffing That Good Tea. The title was a 6 out of 10. The tea of the day was a Japanese cherry blossom green tea. The overall topics were the formula for the podcast, green teas, frog skin, homegrown tea, science is witchcraft, Enlightenment thinkers, Newman's fun holiday game idea, the history of green tea, fan art of the cult riding a dragon, the tea's flavor profile, what green tea pairs with, pears, Time Master Gavin discusses a demon that plagues our lands, the phantom kangaroo, Eminem, the phantom kangaroo II, China took their pandas back, Tristan should run the math on how many kangaroos escaped from zoos, bears being trained with gumdrops, Stardew Valley, human trafficking, the phantom kangaroo III, phantom kangaroo poems, Kyan's Spectruminal viewing, Hogwarts Legacy, actually getting to the viewing, discussing the story, Kyan's coworker, and old classes. Kyan was an 8 out of 10. Gavin was a 9 out of 10. Haley, the tea miser, was an 8 out of 10. I laughed 4 times and counted 129 swear words. I gave it an A tier.
So to make sure.
So it's gonna be more refreshing.
Wonderful. Excited.
You know how like frogs have like skin?
Yeah, but you can't talk about the French people like this.
Well, okay. I mean, I do hate the French and their skin, but I was just like, you know how like frogs have like very.
On to the actual placement of these 2 episodes on the tier list. Now then, as previously stated, I'm about to rank the episodes of the podcast. Episode 1, we placed an S tier, as every good podcast should start out with a hit or a miss, which should tell the audience whether they should become invested or they should find another podcast to listen to. In this case, the 3 hosts have themselves an absolute hit, and I'd recommend it to anyone who wants to learn more about tea, the paranormal, and just hear an incredible story. Episode 2, meanwhile, is a rung down, because after the perfection of episode 1, you cannot get better. And thus, it lands in A tier, until something comes along to go above the pilot episode. Now then, after that's all said and done, you're probably wondering why I'm in a cult robe. I'm gonna be honest, it's because that's the general vibe of the podcast thus far, and I've seen brief clips of future episodes, and I don't believe they wear their robes anymore, but for now, I shall continue to adorn my robe. Well, with those 2 episodes ranked, I'm currently looking at the next 12. Episode 3 has already been watched by me, and all important assets have been acquired. I just need to watch episode 4 and rank it, and then I can come back and record the next episode, covering episodes 3 and 4. Until then, I'll see you next time.